Okay, so my presentation is on the Bastian Piano Basics method. So James Bastian, he has been using and teaching from these books for about 40 years now. He passed away in 2005, but his methods and his piano books are widely used all around the world. So this is the first piece that I will be talking about orally. And so the good thing that this method book does is it has the right hand position up in the top, which is the first 5 notes in a D major scale. And it even highlights new notes that haven't been learned in the book yet. And so this is could be really helpful for new students, because this piece specifically, your hand position doesn't move at all. And so by even just practicing, I think if I were to be teaching this, I would have the student just practice, because that is the position and you aren't moving your hands at all. So that could be helpful for students, even just learning the basic D major scale. And it's helpful in this piece specifically because that's the only position that your hand needs to be in. Also, when teaching this, I would point out the 2 sections. This piece specifically is broken up into 2 big slurred sections, the first line and the second line. I think when you're teaching it, it's just important to emphasize to make it sound like there's 2 separate sections in the piece. Also, at this beginning level, it's important for the students to count the time out loud. I remember when I think I actually had this method book, my teacher would have me count, like, so the first measure is, and so you can have your student count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which can be helpful in that way. Another cool thing that this method book does is it has notes that, like, new concepts that aren't being introduced that the student needs to pay attention to. So for example, a sharp note remains sharp for the whole measure. And so this is specifically seen in the 3rd measure, which I think for someone who is at this level, it would be important for you to emphasize that when you're teaching. So when it goes, to point out that the F sharp is a sharp both times that you play it, even though in the writing it doesn't specifically have it written as a sharp. And that concept is also repeated down here. And then another way that that I would teach this is, like I mentioned before, with how it's divided into 2 slurs, and the note that is divided is a D and a D. So that note is repeated, so it goes like this. And then it's important for the student to lift up their hand, and then start the next line in the next section, just so that the piece does follow that slurred movement. You could even have the student just practice lifting the D and separating that last note of each, just so that the sections are pretty clear, and that whole concept of a slur and moving from one slur to another slur is taught to the student. And the last thing that I think would be a challenge in this book, or something that could be talked about, is the left hand. So as you notice, that the left hand is only used in the last 2 measures of each line, and up here it only talks about the right hand position because the left hand really is only playing 2 notes. So I think just when the student is starting to play, to have their left hand in position, because they are not going to be, for example, I don't know how I can really show you, but if for the whole right hand part, the left hand is not on the keyboard, the student might have trouble finding where they're supposed to be. So maybe having the student start having their hand in position right here, which, even though it's not written on the paper, that's the fingering that we would use. And so just to have their left hand right here and ready to play that, so that when it comes to that measure, the student's not caught off guard or surprised. Okay, so here's how I would play, or how the student should in the end play this piece.